Mountains don't care about experience. They don't care about preparation, reputation, or how many summits you've conquered before. When a mountain decides to kill, it does so without warning, without mercy, and without discrimination. That's exactly what happened on Lenin Peak in July 1990. 45 seasoned climbers had gathered at Camp 2, a flat expanse nicknamed the Frying Pan, perched at 17,388 feet in the Pamir Range. These weren't amateurs chasing Instagram photos. They were elite mountaineers from the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Israel, Switzerland, and Spain. Many had already conquered some of the world's most dangerous peaks. One among them had even stood atop Everest. The Frying Pan seemed like a safe place to rest, a wide, open plateau where climbers could catch their breath before pushing toward the summit. That night, after days of relentless snowfall, the weather finally showed signs of clearing. Spirits lifted, tents went up. Simple dinners were shared. Sleeping bags were unrolled. No one suspected that beneath the seemingly calm surface, the mountain was preparing something catastrophic. Just after midnight, the ground began to tremble. A deep rumble echoed through the darkness. Before anyone could react, an avalanche of staggering proportion broke loose from the slope above. Nearly a mile wide and half a mile long, it swept through the camp at unimaginable speed, burying tents, gear, and climbers under tons of compacted snow and ice. Within seconds, 43 people were dead. Only 2 survived. The 1990 Lenin Peak avalanche remains one of the deadliest single events in mountaineering history. It wasn't a storm that killed them. It wasn't a fall or a crevasse. It was a mountain that simply shrugged, sending an unstoppable wall of destruction through a camp full of people who had done everything right. This is the story of what happened that night, the desperate fight for survival that followed, and why Lenin Peak continues to claim lives more than 3 decades later. Lenin Peak rises 23,406 feet into the sky, a giant of ice and rock standing guard over Tajikistan's Pamir Range. First documented in 1871, the mountain was named in 1928 to honor Vladimir Lenin, the revolutionary who shaped the Soviet Union. Climbers across the Soviet bloc knew it simply as Lenin Peak, a name that stuck even after the mountain was officially renamed Ibn Sina Peak in 2006. To this day, most mountaineers still call it by its Soviet-era name. Here's the thing about Lenin Peak. It has a reputation. A dangerous one, actually, but not in the way you might expect. This mountain is often called the easiest peak over 23,000 feet. That sounds reassuring until you realize how many climbers have died believing it. The standard route up Lenin Peak begins in Osh, Kyrgyzstan's second-largest city. From there, climbers endure a 7-hour vehicle journey through rugged terrain and winding mountain roads until they reach base camp at 11,800 feet. The camp has some comforts: warm water, decent food, maybe even a hot shower. But those luxuries are just a brief reprieve, a false sense of security before the mountain reveals what it's really capable of. The trek to advanced base camp at 13,800 feet is where things start to change. Climbers hike alongside the massive Lenin Glacier, listening to the constant groans and creaks of shifting ice beneath their feet. The path is narrow, carved into loose, sliding scree. One wrong step and the rocks could slip away, pulling you dangerously close to the glacier's edge. The air grows thin. Cold rattles against your face. You're reminded with every breath just how far you are from solid ground. Life at advanced base camp is stripped down to survival. The air is colder, food becomes simple and sparse. Showers are a distant memory. Climbers practice with their ice gear, crampons clinking against rock as they rehearse the movements they will need for the final push. The wind never stops. From here, the route climbs to Camp 2 at 17,388 feet. The climbers call it the Frying Pan. The name sounds almost playful until you understand why it exists. In summer, sunlight bounces off the surrounding snow and ice, turning the flat plateau into a blinding oven. A few minutes of direct exposure can leave you badly sunburned, but when the sun sets, temperatures plunge to bone-chilling lows. Blistering heat by day, freezing cold by night, the Frying Pan looks safe. It's wide, flat, and open. The kind of place where you'd want to pitch a tent and rest before the summit push. But appearances deceive. The plateau sits beneath steep slopes that are prone to avalanches. Small slides come down regularly. Most are harmless, most. In July 1990, 45 climbers set up camp on that plateau, trusting its flat, open surface to keep them safe through the night. They had no way of knowing that the slopes above were holding something far worse than a small slide. The summer of 1990 brought climbers from across the Soviet Union and beyond to Lenin Peak. They came for the challenge, the adventure, the chance to stand atop one of the Pamir Range's most famous summits. By mid-July, 45 of them had gathered at Camp 2, the frying pan, ready to push toward the peak. These weren't beginners chasing a thrill. The group included 23 members of the Leningrad Mountaineering Club, led by the experienced Leonid Troshchinenko. 6 climbers had traveled from Czechoslovakia, 4 came from Israel, 2 from Switzerland, 1 from Spain. Many had already conquered some of the world's most dangerous peaks. They knew what they were doing. Friday, July 13th started with cautious optimism. After days of relentless snowfall, the weather finally showed signs of clearing. The sky opened just enough to lift everyone's spirits. This was their window. By evening, tents were pitched across the plateau. Climbers shared stories over simple dinners, talked about the route ahead, and settled in for rest before the next leg of the journey. But not everyone stayed. Vladimir Baliberdin, a legendary climber who had once stood on the summit of Everest, had been with the group earlier that day. Something felt wrong to him. He couldn't explain it exactly, but instinct told him to descend. He listened. His friend Boris Korshinov chose to stay behind, along with Boris's girlfriend, Yelena Uvarova. Yelena had actually started going down as well, but she felt unwell partway through and returned to Camp 2 to rest. Another climber, Sergei Golub, was also descending that evening. His feet ached badly from ill-fitting boots, a frustrating mistake, a minor inconvenience. It would end up saving his life. As night approached, the snowfall returned, heavy, relentless, unlike anything many of the climbers had experienced before. Yet the storm seemed to ease as darkness settled over the mountain. The clouds thinned, the wind calmed. To the exhausted climbers tucked into their sleeping bags, the improving weather felt like a signal that the worst had passed. It hadn't. Some of the tents were pitched dangerously close to the traverse, a section of the plateau more exposed to the slopes above. A few climbers were warned about the avalanche risk in that spot, but they were tired. Moving camp would have taken energy none of them had left. They decided to stay, convinced they'd be safe for one night. One climber made a different choice. He needed more space, so he found a separate tent farther from the main group. He settled in with a warm drink, lay down, and drifted towards sleep. He had no idea that this small decision, made for comfort, would become the difference between life and death. The frying pan fell quiet. 45 people rested beneath the mountain's shadow, unaware that the slopes above them were holding back something catastrophic. The calm wouldn't last. In just a few hours, the silence would shatter. The stillness shattered without warning. A deep rumble tore through the night, vibrating through the snow and ice beneath the camp. The ground trembled. Then came the sound. A roar so vast and violent that it swallowed everything else. An enormous mass of snow, ice, and debris broke loose from the slope above the frying pan. This wasn't an ordinary avalanche. It was a collapse of staggering proportion, nearly a mile wide and half a mile long, descending on the camp at unimaginable speed. Within seconds, tents and everything inside them were swept away. Climbers were ripped from their sleep and tossed down the mountain as if they weighed nothing at all. The heavy, compacted snow buried everything in its path. Most never had a chance to react. Alexei Korotkov was one of the few who survived. The force of the avalanche flung him from his tent, sending him spinning through the darkness. He tumbled violently, unable to tell which way was up, which way was down. Snow pressed against his face, filling his mouth and nose, making it nearly impossible to breathe. His body slammed against ice and rock as the avalanche carried him further from the camp. He fought to stay conscious, knowing that if he blacked out, he would die. The snow carried him nearly 800 yards before dropping him off the edge of a glacier. He fell roughly 80 feet and landed hard on his stomach. His body was bruised, cut, battered beyond recognition. But he was alive. Korotkov pushed himself upright, dazed and struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Nearby, he heard movement. Another climber, Miroslav Grossman, was buried steep in the snow, unable to free himself. Korotkov pulled him out. The two men stood together in the freezing darkness, their clothes torn, their jackets and boots gone. The bitter cold bit at their exposed skin. Survival was now a race against time. They found pieces of their shattered tent and a few sleeping mats scattered across the snow. They wrapped themselves as best they could and waited for dawn, shivering through the longest hours of their lives. When morning light finally broke over the mountains, the devastation revealed itself. The frying pan, once crowded with 45 climbers, was silent, buried. A massive layer of snow covered everything. The two survivors began their descent. The snow was thick and deep. Without proper gear, every step was agony. Fog rolled in, making it nearly impossible to see the path ahead. Korotkov used snowballs as makeshift markers, tossing them forward to track his direction through the white blindness. By late afternoon, Groman's energy gave out completely. He couldn't continue. Korotkov covered him with whatever warm material remained, then pressed on alone. Exhausted, injured, and driven by nothing but the desperate need to survive. Hours later, he finally encountered a rescue team heading up the mountain. They escorted him back to camp at 13,800 feet. His back was covered in bruises so severe, he could barely lie down. Of the 45 climbers at Camp 2, only 2 had survived. The rescue mission that followed was as heartbreaking as it was futile. When teams finally reached the frying pan, they found only devastation. The snow had compacted so densely over the campsite that digging through it was nearly impossible. On that first day of searching, rescuers managed to retrieve just 4 bodies. They quickly realized that any further attempts would be in vain. Most of the climbers were buried so deep that reaching them wasn't possible with the tools and time available. 43 people remained entombed in the mountain. Their families would have to wait years for any sense of closure. It wasn't until the mid-2000s that the glacier began to give up its dead. As temperatures rose and ice melted, remains and climbing equipment started emerging from the frozen ground. In 2007, an expedition led by Peter Salkat, the son of one of the lost climbers, recovered additional remains. Over the following years, more artifacts and bodies surfaced from the ice, each discovery reopening wounds that had never fully healed. Today, a memorial stands at Ochiktosh Base Camp, approximately 12,000 feet above sea level near the foot of Lenin Peak. A large stone displays the names of all 43 victims. Climbers pass by it on their way up the mountain, a somber reminder of what the frying pan took in a single night. Some survivors refused to let the tragedy end their climbing careers. Alexei Korotkov, despite everything he endured, never stopped. He went on to conquer other peaks and join multiple expeditions, often in memory of the friends he lost that night. His resilience reflected something deeply ingrained in the mountaineering spirit, an acceptance that the mountains will always hold the power and a choice to climb anyway. But Lenin Peak has never stopped claiming lives. In 1974, 16 years before the avalanche, 8 women attempting the first all-female ascent were caught in a powerful storm just below the summit. Despite warnings, they stayed together, facing extreme winds and freezing temperatures. All 8 perished from exposure. Their story became another chapter in the mountain's unforgiving history. Today, approximately 15 serious incidents occur on Lenin Peak every summer. About 1/3 of them prove fatal. Success rates remain below 25%. Unpredictable weather, frequent avalanches, hidden crevasses, and altitude sickness continue to catch climbers off guard, no matter how prepared they think they are. In 2024, efforts to improve safety took a meaningful step forward. The Slava Topolnitsky project launched, named in honor of a legendary guide who died on Lenin Peak in 2022. The initiative brings together British, American, and Kyrgyz organizations to establish medical stations, rescue equipment, and safety training programs along the mountain's popular routes. The goal is simple: reduce preventable deaths by promoting conservative travel plans and proper preparation. But no amount of training can eliminate the fundamental truth about mountains like this one. Lenin Peak doesn't care about your experience. It doesn't care about your equipment or your plans. It takes who it wants, when it wants. The 1990 Lenin Peak avalanche didn't happen because anyone made a mistake. The climbers at Camp 2 were experienced, prepared, and careful. They had conquered mountains before. They knew the risks. They followed the protocols. None of it mattered. That's the terrifying truth about mountains like Lenin Peak. You can do everything right and still lose. You can read the weather, check the slopes, set up camp in what looks like the safest spot available, and still find yourself buried under a mile-wide wall of snow before you even wake up. 43 people died that night. Fathers, sons, daughters, friends. Climbers who had dreamed of standing on that summit and had earned the right to try. Their names are now carved into a stone memorial at base camp, a quiet reminder to everyone who passes on their way up. The two survivors, Alexei Korotkov and Miroslav Grossman, endured something no training could prepare them for. Thrown from their tents, battered down the mountain, left without boots or jackets in freezing darkness. They survived through sheer will, through refusing to stop moving, through helping each other when giving up would have been easier. Korotkov never stopped climbing. He went on to conquer other peaks, joining expeditions in memory of those who didn't make it. His resilience speaks to something deep in the mountaineering spirit, an acceptance that the mountains will always be more powerful, and a decision to climb anyway. Today, Lenin Peak still claims lives every summer. The statistics haven't changed much. The weather remains unpredictable. The avalanches still come without warning. New safety initiatives are helping, but no amount of preparation can eliminate the fundamental reality. When you climb a mountain like this, you're accepting a gamble you might not win. The 1990 disaster taught the climbing world that even flat, open camps aren't safe. That experience doesn't guarantee survival. That mountains don't care about your resume. Lenin Peak stands today as it did then, beautiful, deadly, and utterly indifferent to whoever dares to climb it.